Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Authentic and Unaltered. This is episode 10 of my series, and with me today is John of Wade Boggs Fan. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, John. Thanks for having me on.
All
You should have
right.
saved you should have saved me for episode 26.
Yeah, I just couldn't wait that long. I'm sorry.
We're
Didn't
12.
get
12.
enough
We're
match for it.
close. We're close.
Yeah,
10 and 12. That works.
yeah. It's pretty close, but yeah. Welcome to coming today. I definitely love watching your channel, and it's great to have you here to
Thanks.
talk about you. So, up first, how did it all start for you with sports? I saw mention in one of your videos that you weren't the best little leaguer. So,
No.
so how
No.
how did how did
I
that all start?
well, as most kids that I knew growing up started off with the T-ball, and they had it up to it was T-ball, then it was, I want to say, then like A ball or something like that, then minor league, and then the major league. And the major league was, for the 10, 11, 12-year olds that would, in theory, the age group that would go to the Little League World Series, that
Oh yeah,
upper age group there in Little League.
yep,
And it took me the last year of eligibility to finally have a team pick me for the major league. So finally, at least I had 1 year of that, where some of my other friends had been in there for maybe at least 2 years, if not a couple of them, maybe three. But finally got on there. I wasn't on a good team to begin with. But my problem was that the coach that I had, I can't remember whether he was the dad of one of the kids on my team or just a volunteer, but we do uh, practice, and he would pitch, and he did not have control of his pitches. And so I'd go up there, and this is just batting practice, right? And he'd hit me. Like, I mean, again, not hard, it wouldn't hurt or whatever, but when I
yeah,
see a pitch come in, my first reaction was, it's going to hit me. So now I get into a game, and these kids are throwing faster, but with better control. But my first thought, if it happens over and over and over again, is that ball's going to hit you.
yeah,
And so I just wasn't the best. I just wasn't the best hitter and all that stuff. But I still had fun. I enjoyed the game. And of course, that carried on to collecting baseball cards.
well,
And
sure.
my first packs of cards were 1978. So I was 6 years old, and took my allowance, which I believe at the time was 50 cents a week, on a Sunday. And after church, my dad would go to this local corner store, get a newspaper, and my sister and I would go in, and we could spend our allowance. And they had a whole bunch of candy, comic books, baseball cards, different things. Sometimes I'd pick up a comic, but sometimes they'd have, 78s or, 79 tops or whatever. And I think at the time, packs of 78s were 20 cents. So I'd maybe buy 2 packs and maybe buy a thing of gum, Hubba Bubba bubble gum or something like that for 5 cents.
Yeah,
And there was my 5 or 10 cents. So there was my 50 cents that I spent. And um still remember having those. I still have those 78s and 79s and 80s, all those cards from my collection. But I still, whenever I look through them, the smell of those vintage cards and just brings me back to 6 and 7 years old.
well, that's great. Uh, so back to the like fandom. Uh, where were you actually growing up? Because that's where I'm confused. Because you're in Pennsylvania now, but did you actually grow up near New York to become the Met fan?
No,
Okay,
born and raised in central Pennsylvania.
okay,
Now, my interest in the Red Sox has been lifelong. It ebbs and flows a little bit, but my mom was originally from Massachusetts and moved down to Pennsylvania before she met my dad and got married. Because my dad's family has been in central Pennsylvania going back like 7 generations. So my mom's the connection to the Red Sox. Whenever we'd go up for vacation or Thanksgiving, especially around, well, it'd be vacation because Thanksgiving, by that time, baseball was over with. But during the summer, my grandfather would have the Red Sox game on TV. Occasionally, we had made a special trip, would go to Fenway Park. Had been there around maybe 3 or 4 times. So always liked the Red Sox, but I couldn't get any games on TV. And this was, way before internet and all that stuff and MLB TV packages where you can catch every single game and so on.
Oh yeah.
So one of the teams that I could pick up locally were New York teams. So the Yankees, the Mets. Of course, I could get the Phillies on TV, the Braves, TBS. But it was around the early 80s, 82, 83. And 83 was when the Mets really started building some of their talent base. They had Strawberry coming up. I think they had picked up Gary Carter. Keith Hernandez, I think, was around that time that they came upon the Mets. And I just started liking some of their players, saw them on TV. And that's how I just started following the Mets in the National League. But in the American League, I always rooted for the Red Sox. So 86 was tough. That was a tough year for me.
But, a little conflicted in that World Series, huh?
Yeah. I felt bad for my mom because, she obviously grew up never having seen the Red Sox win a World Series. She was around in 67 when they lost to the Cardinals, 75 when they lost to the Reds. And so I felt really, really bad for her, especially obviously that game 6. I was watching in a separate room. I was downstairs because I was sort of leaning toward the Mets because, again, I had watched them throughout the season on TV. And so it's sort of leaning toward the Mets, but I know obviously my mom was rooting for the Red Sox. And I came up when it was the bottom of the ninth there. I came up from upstairs. I still remember it. There were like 1 or 2 outs. And I said to my mom, I said, hey, congratulations. Hey, the Red Sox played a great series. You finally get, and so I started getting ready for bed. I had written off the Mets. So I was upstairs brushing my teeth or something like that. And I hear my mom go, no. I'm like, no, okay. A couple of minutes later, no. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? So my parents had a TV in their bedroom. So I'm upstairs. I turned the World Series game on and I'm watching it. And that's when it was, the 2 outs, base hit, run score, pass ball, all this stuff, Mookie Wilson, all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I just see here? And I came down and my mom's like, I can't believe they blew it. So I remember that game 6 vividly.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you got to feel bad for Buckner. I mean, he had a career that I think is better than some Hall of Famers that got in through the Veterans Committee. I mean,
yep.
But
the thing that people forget is that his pass ball, it won it for the Mets there, but there were other things that led up to the Mets even tying the game. And it was game 6. It wasn't game 7. The Red Sox still had an opportunity to win game 7. So I always felt bad for him as well. And I think so many, especially Boston fans, said Buckner cost us the World Series. Well, no, he may have cost them game 6. Even if he had fielded the ball, the game was tied. It would have gone into extra innings, and the Mets still may have won that. So I just never understood. Obviously, it was the big play that led to the Mets winning run in game 6. But I think he just took way too much of the burden and heat on the Mets the Red Sox not winning.
I mean, he took all the heat away from Calvin Schiraldi for sure.
Yeah, I think he was the one who threw the pass ball that tied the game. So, yeah.
Yeah. But, all right. So, I mean, ultimately, how did you end up then choosing Boggs over any of the Mets players? I mean,
that's a good question, and one that gets asked a lot of like, well, why Boggs? And well, not just why Boggs, but why all that that you see behind me. It's one thing to collect cards and and so on. um, for the longest time, I would, other than buying packs, I would collect complete sets. Now, I wouldn't necessarily put sets together. I'd get sets, either I'd buy a complete set or get one for Christmas, my birthday, or something like that. For the longest time, I was mainly a set collector with singles through opening packs just for the fun of it. But it just got to be too much with the number of sets. So we're talking about, 1988, Score came on. Then 89 was Upper Deck. So now you had Topps, Donruss, Fleer, Score, Upper Deck. And then those companies said, well, why should we only come out with one set? Let's come out with Flair Ultra and Tops this
Oh yeah, they went
and
crazy
so
in the
the sets
90s.
just
Yeah.
exploded. And I'm like, I felt it was just too much. So I said, I want to go in a different direction. And I knew there were collectors out there. This was 96, 97. I knew there were collectors out there that focused on a particular player or a team. I was like, well, I could maybe collect the Red Sox team, as many Red Sox players or Mets players. I'm like, no, I like to see if I could collect a whole bunch of cards of one player. So I said, okay, well, what player can I collect? So fortunately, a lot of my singles cards I had in order by player. So I just went through and it was almost like the luck of the draw. I had a decent number of Wade Boggs cards as opposed to other players. And one, I'm like, oh, okay, hey, he's a Red Sox. All right, there's a plus. And two, this was the time, late 90s. You had, um, it wasn't quite like the late 80s with the Bash Brothers of McGuire and Canseco and things like that, but it was getting to the point where you had Griffey and you had others, and it was more about home runs, all right, and less about batting titles. And I always was more impressed with a player who could hit for high average and get on base than someone who was necessarily big and strong and hit home runs, but have a 260 or 270 average. And because they were where they were in the lineup and hit home runs, they'd have high RBIs or something like that. I'm like, well, they weren't a dime a dozen back in the late 90s, but I was just more impressed with players who could hit for high average. To me, that was a greater talent and ability than potentially brute strength. So that I was like, well, Boggs was a 5-time batting champion and all this stuff, and he was approaching 3,000 hits. And so all those combinations were okay. I'm going to collect Wade Boggs. So I went to my local card shop, and there's really only one in my area. And so I bought every single different Wade Boggs card that he had, which was maybe 100 or so or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, now what I'm going to do? Like, because I didn't have mail ordered catalogs and all that stuff. I didn't go to a lot of card shows. There weren't that many in my area. And then eBay came along in 98. So I think I was one of the earliest members. I think they started in 98 and I've been a member since 98. And that just exploded things because I'm like, look at all those Wade Boggs cards out there. And then I remember there was a one or two other Boggs collectors who I got into some heated bidding on. Some well, maybe not in today's standards, but back then I overpaid on some really low numbers or one of ones. And on a lot of them, I got outbid. I'm like, I can't believe you're paying this much for that card. Today, it's like, darn, I wish I would have outbid him to have that card. But yeah, so that eBay really is what did it for me. And then it was the cards. And then what took me to that next level of craziness was me meeting up and becoming good friends with Rich Davis. He lives out in Chicago, and he is the Boggs collector. Everyone says because I'm on YouTube, and he doesn't have too much of a YouTube presence. People think, oh, John, you have the greatest Boggs collection. I'm like, well, wait till you see Rich's. He's more on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. Well, I was featured in an issue of Beckett's Super Collector issues. They did that in the I forget when it was, 2000, somewhere around there or whatever. And I just submitted. They say, hey, if you're a super collector, send this information, fill this form out. And they selected me, and it had my email address. And so Rich saw that article, said, oh my gosh, there's another Wade Boggs collector. So he reached out to me, and we've been friends ever since. Well, he is huge into memorabilia. So I started seeing all the stuff that he had. And while he has a lot of cards, he was looking at my cards. So it spurred him to get more, expand his card collection. And it influenced me to expand my memorabilia collection. So I started buying posters and jerseys that eventually had Wade sign, and autographed photos, and some crazy things like a happy birthday cassette. So you could listen to Wade Boggs wish you a happy, I don't know what it actually says because it's still in the package. But it has some collectible facsimile autograph thing on it. But you start picking these things up for like $10 or something like that, and then you suddenly have a collection of what you see behind me over the span of 25 years.
Yeah, I've seen your room tour. It's impressive amount of stuff.
Now, I'm not as bad as my friend Rich. Rich, if he sees anything at all with Wade Boggs' name or picture on it, he has to have it. I'm not that crazy. I'm a little bit more selective, and oh yeah, hey, that's cool. Maybe I'll, depending on the price, maybe I'll grab that or something like that. But here's just another. I have some more stuff here, but I mean, again, only someone like me, right? Just some Yankees socks. They're like put out by the Hall of Fame, and it's of him riding the horse after winning the '96 World Series. They're socks, but it's Wade Boggs. So I'm like,
Sure.
and they weren't that expensive. I'm like, okay, I'm never going to wear them, but it's just I have some Wade Boggs socks. It
Why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So, any other Boggs items or cards you want to show while we're talking about them?
Yeah, I picked just some random things that were sitting around and stuff. Here is some professional weighted training gloves, and just has Boggs on the picture there. Obviously, this is after he retired. Well, I don't. Well,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. He's just not in a team hat. I don't know if it says what year this came out. Yeah, I don't think it does.
Well, it's
But
just
again, he
not
has
licensed
his,
with MLB clearly. So
yeah. Let's see here. Well, this is from the Hall of Fame. This was, I think, sold in maybe the gift shop or something like that. It's serial number to 2005, and it's of him and Sandberg.
cool.
And let's see, this one, again, I find stuff on eBay. I think someone just made this. Okay, it shows this plaque, and it has sort of like this little career stats and all that stuff, and they turned it into probably something TTM that they sent, and then they put it up for sale on eBay. So I just thought that was a cool little autograph item there. Again, probably didn't cost me that much. Here's some Red Sox postcards. So I have I know the light is sort of, but it's just postcard back. These are from 1987. So I have the individual one, but this one I think may be the entire team. So there's a group of them in here. But so I have some stuff that's opened and some stuff that's unopened.
Well, quick question that popped in my head after that last item. I know you catalog everything very carefully. How many Wade Boggs autograph items do you now own?
The memorabilia I don't have as well cataloged. If I had to guess of just memorabilia, and so not baseball cards, if I had to guess memorabilia wise, oh boy, I probably have to say maybe 150, 200 autograph stuff. And then when it comes to baseball cards, I think that's up over 500 or 600, I think, that are autographed. Mainly, pack pulled, you know, autograph cards. So every once in a while, I'll see a listing on eBay and I go, that's fake. And my friend Rich will go, that's fake. And sometimes he'll even reach out to Wade and go, Wade, that doesn't look real, does it? And usually Wade's like, yeah, that's not my signature. So, but here's a pack of 2005 Topps retired baseball with Boggs on it. So open pack, but someone had sent this to me and said, "Hey, you might like this for your collection." I'm like, "Sure." Just a little
Cool.
notepad from obviously the Hall of Fame. When someone's elected to the Hall of Fame, they have so many ways to get your money, and
Oh
you
yeah.
can buy this and this and this. Here's a 86. We were talking about the 86 World Series. Here's the media guide with Boggs down there at the bottom. You got
Cool.
Buckner up there, Rich Gedman, and Oil Can Boyd.
Mm.
And finally, I'd seen this pop up in a couple other collectors, especially Red Sox collectors, but this one I found unopened. It's a Patrick's Red Sox baseball card puzzle. And of course, right there is Boggs's 83 Topps rookie card. So it's
Awesome.
still sealed. All the pieces are in there. So I'm not going to open it and try to put it together. But again, those are just some of the weird, unique things that I pulled from all the stuff you see behind me.
Okay. So, moving on to Boggs, you've gotten into vintage cards quite a bit for the last few years. And is there any particular overarching project with that, or goals you've got in mind?
I would say my not necessarily re-entry into vintage, but getting really serious about vintage started as a result of being on YouTube. My initial thought, this was beginning of the pandemic. I think I got on, really started making content toward the end of January of 2020. I think you had mentioned in one of my very first videos or very early on, I'm like, well, I'm home for work from the pandemic. It should just be a month. And it turned out to be like 2 years.
Yeah.
I said, okay, hey, I started watching YouTube videos on baseball cards maybe earlier in 2020. I'm like, wow, there's this whole universe here. I didn't really know people were doing baseball card related videos on YouTube. I never really did much on with YouTube and was doing some searching, and these videos would start popping up. And Mike Baseball Collector and John Mangini were some of the early channels that I watched. And of course, they're big into vintage. And even though I started my channel saying, hey, look at all these Wade Boggs cards and all this stuff, um, I did have some vintage cards in my collection that I had purchased years ago. Just, I always liked vintage. I don't know why I didn't make the decision back at that crossroads where I decided to become a player collector and didn't decide to say, hey, maybe I'll go into vintage. That would have been an interesting move. But needless to say, I went the Boggs route. So I had some vintage cards and some fairly nice vintage cards. So I said, well, maybe I can build on that. I was getting to the point where not Boggs burnout. I don't think I'm ever going to stop collecting Boggs. But after you get 5,000 different cards and 5,250 different cards, the newer stuff that started coming out over the last 3-4 years, for at least for Boggs, was like all low serial numbered, high end product stuff. Because of course he's since retired, and so they seem to be putting Boggs into all this high end, Topps 5-star definitive, or you name it. It's the high end product where he has cards serial numbered out of like 25 or less. Well, they come up on eBay and people want 150, 200, $300 for them. And I'm like, the law of diminishing, was it the law of diminishing returns, something like that? The more you get, the less impactful things are.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay, I have so many hundred autographed cards of Boggs. Do I really need, unless it's a special card, do I really need that extra one? Or can I use my money in a different way and expand my collection? So I sort of slowed down a little bit with my massive Wade Boggs purchases and devoted my limited hobby funds to vintage. And so I've built up a nice little collection, not like some of the other long-time vintage collectors out there. But I have about 300 or so graded vintage cards that I've picked up over the last, say 2.5, 3 years, something like that. So, yeah, that's really exciting, getting to relearn and um, get more involved in the vintage side of the hobby.
Any particular favorites on that side?
Yeah, there's some. I really like the early the 1950s. I think is my favorite decade for vintage. I don't have many pre-war cards. I haven't taken that next leap yet, because that's a whole nother area where, it's prior to Topps, prior to Bowman, you're getting into companies that would either put them in as promotions. They weren't necessarily card companies. Now you had some like Gaudi and stuff, but um, there's just so many different things, companies or products you get into, especially the 1920s. They're put in, caramel or this or whatever, and you have to have a lot of knowledge, and I'm just not there yet. And of course, that's more expensive stuff as well. But I do have one of my favorites from pre-war is my 1909 Christy Mathewson
Oh yeah,
dark
I was
cap.
hoping we get to see that one.
Yeah, that one is just. I'd always wanted this card. Now, Christy Mathewson has a somewhat local tie to me. Growing up in central Pennsylvania, right across the river is Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, home of Bucknell University. And Christy Mathewson attended Bucknell University, was on the baseball team, and I think even on the football team. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he's even buried in Lewisburg Cemetery. I think, and maybe at least at one point, but I have to do that research. But I thought I heard somewhere that he was buried in the Lewisburg Cemetery. So, and I got my master's degree at Bucknell. So there's that tie there to him. But I always thought he was one of the greatest pitchers of all time. This is a sweet Caparol back, by the way. Wish it was a polar bear. I love the polar bear backs, but
Yeah.
So that one there, and I always love the dark cap image as opposed to the white cap. So that's one of my favorite vintage cards. Pick that one up. I'm trying to think if that was maybe my first national out in Chicago that I attended. But I'm a big fan of the 50s, and in particular, the early Bowman cards. I know I've showed these off before, but probably one of my favorites is the 50 Bowman. I love the size of them compared to other cards, and they're just little pieces of art. And this is the Bob Feller. I when I saw this at the National a couple years ago, I was like, it wasn't on my radar. I saw it though. I'm like, and I fell in love with the card. I'm like, I have to
It's a
have that
beautiful card.
And then, of course, you have the Yogi Berra.
Sure, classic.
And then I've been sort of not necessarily working on an exact player run, but some of my cards are the Warren Spawn. So here's the 51 Spawn. Just love that pose of him and that classic pitching style that he had.
He's got so many good looking cards, though.
Yeah, fairly recent one is the 52 Bowman I picked up.
Oh yeah, another good one.
And then this was from my older. So all the ones I showed off here were fairly recent, maybe except for the Mathewson. But here are some of my older ones that I had before I really got into vintage. And these were ones I bought at my local card shop raw. And I wish I would have sent them into PSA right away. But anyway, there's the 52 Bowman mantle. And I have the 52 Musial.
That's cool.
And then, of course, we get into some of the couple of the big boys here. I got the 53 mantle. Not in the best shape, but it's a second year Topps.
Come on, it's
Second year Topps,
yeah.
third year card. a lot of people say, no, this isn't the year after his rookie card. It's a 53. But just love that image there of him.
Well,
So
you're looking at someone who's collecting ones for expensive cards, so that's gorgeous to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you have a very nice 1.5, stuff collection as well. So those are maybe some of my highlights. I mean, if there's other things that come up, I can pull some other cards here, but definitely the 50s are my favorite decade of vintage. Now, I did put together a sort of a little, you mentioned a project, as a sort of just, it was meant to be a one-off. I did a video called 100 cards for $100,000 that, I'd see these videos, and some of them or maybe more modern collectors, investors. But anyway, they're like, hey, I spent $10,000 at such and such show, and look at all these cards I got. And I was thinking to myself, wow, wouldn't it be nice if I could just go to a card show like the National with $10,000? Like what vintage cards would I buy? And I quickly realized, depending on the card and the grade, $10,000 could go pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Again, depending on what you're looking to buy, right? So I said, all right, well, let's step it up a little bit. Let's say I had $100,000. What if I had $100,000 to just suddenly was put in front of me? What vintage cards would I buy? And so I came up with a list of 100 cards based on varying grades and price points. And I put that together and I did the video. I'm like, hey, here's what I'd buy if I had $100,000. And then after that got some attention and some comments, oh, that's pretty good. I'm like, I looked through the list and I'm like, well, this card's not that expensive. And that one's not too bad. And I'm like, the more I looked at it, I'm like, I can go after some of these. Now, maybe not the entire list. There's a 52 Mano on there.
Yeah.
But I turned that into a project of mine, and I'm already up to card 36 off of, and I started this in November of 21. Yeah. So about a year and a half ago. And so it's been fun. So I've been occasionally, when I have some funds built up, because they're getting more and more expensive now, I look to get a card off that list. And they're the standard rookie cards and some other players. It helped me complete my Corey Yastrzemski run because I had a whole bunch of Corey Yastrzemskis on there. So that was a sort of a side benefit of getting all those Yastrzemski cards. It allowed me to complete his playing day run. And yeah, so that's been a lot of fun.
Well, cool. Yeah, I've been watching that series, so it was on my list to bring up. But so then going into YouTube, it was fun to see a little bit of your evolution. For everyone out there who thinks John has always been slick style, his first two videos are vertical camera and not even talking.
Yeah.
But,
well, the first one, I think is my first technical video. Is that when I'm at a card show with Wade Boggs?
The first one chronologically was the room tour.
Oh, okay. Yep. And of course, yeah, it was like, hey, this is how you hold a camera. I'm like, no. And
yeah, and all you did was pan around the room silently. So,
yep. Yeah.
Yep. And the second one was the signing, where it looked like you had him writing a ton of stuff on that big plate.
Yep. I warned him ahead of time. I said, because we can correspond. We follow each other on Twitter. And so we can send each other messages and stuff. And I don't try to bother him much, but I did warn him. I was going to this one show in northern New Jersey. I said, wait, I have something special for you to sign, but be prepared to write a lot. So I had this plate, uh, Barnwood Sports, and they do custom home plates out of wood,
Yeah.
and it was like a theme of the flag with different colors and stuff like that, and had a B for Boston logo. And so I wanted him to fill almost every single space with a career statistic and sign it. So I even had a piece of paper laid out as a guide. Like, okay, on this line on the left, I want you to put 12-time All-Star. Down here, I want you to put 328 career batting average and stuff like that. And he followed it back and forth, and everyone was watching that was in line. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing thing. And that's what I have as my little logo on all my thumbnails of my video, is him showing off, because I wanted someone to take a picture of it, and that's what I put on all my videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I was. I thought it was incredible how long you were pointing and telling him what to put there. I mean,
But the sound quality, the reason why the sound's on, like there's no sound to that video, at least for most of it,
yeah.
is unfortunately at that show they were playing music in the background. And when I first put it on, YouTube said, "Oh, there's copyright issues." So I had a
Oh,
problem with it. So I had to go in and like wipe out all the audio. But I'm like, hey, I still want the video up there. So that's why if anyone goes all the way back and watches that video, if it's either completely with no sound or muffled or whatever, it's because I had to go and try to wipe out all the background music because I was getting hit with a copyright for YouTube.
yeah. I was wondering why there was occasional intermittent points where you could hear yourself talking there, but
Yeah, that's why I did the best I could. So
yeah. But then, from there, you did a few videos where it was only your face, and then you worked in the second camera so you could do the hand shots, and
yep.
then you started that out with just like a bare table with nothing on it, and then you evolved into having a Boggs beach towel. I assume that's somewhere in your room now.
That is actually right here. I can grab that quick. It is a beach towel. It's a beach towel with, again, one of those weird things you find on eBay. It is a beach towel with George Brett, Don Mattingly, I think. There's Wade Boggs. And there is Don Mattingly. And then you have, I think, yep, George Brett.
Okay.
And so I had that folded up, and that was my sort of mat or background. Just trying to evolve, looking at other people's videos, like how do they set things up? How do they show off their cards? And so, excuse me, just looked at what other people were doing and trying to get ideas. I'm always looking to explore new ways to do videos. Is it, with me, that second camera, I'm like, okay, well, this is cool. I can do this while I'm doing that. And I like to experiment.
Sure. That's what all of us coming in, this new generation, we have you guys before us as a template of what to try out. And, we don't have to, have the same length of evolution necessarily, because there's all these examples out here of what to do. So,
And the more you do something, the more comfortable you get. So, I'm sure if you go back to my early videos, I'm probably just high, this, really straight or whatever. And now I can get on and just feel more comfortable talking into a camera. And so, yeah, just the more. So if anyone's out there looking to start a YouTube channel or just getting started, just keep at it. Just the more videos you do, the more comfortable you'll be at it. And just have fun. I mean, don't worry if you look a bit goofy. I think I look goofy all the time. So, and I still do videos. So yeah.
well, honestly, I thought in your first videos, you didn't seem stiff. You seemed really almost like excited and a little giddy about sharing the stuff.
Well,
So,
well, in a way, yes, because YouTube, I mentioned, we have one local card shop. I don't go to many card shows. Uh, I didn't really have any friends that were into, especially in my older years, that were into baseball cards. So it was me. I mean, I enjoyed collecting and the cards, but I didn't have anyone really to share it with. And now with YouTube, even though at least initially until I started getting involved in some live streams and stuff, it was just me talking to the camera. But I felt that connection with the community because I'd watch their videos, and it was like, wow, I get to talk about my collection. I get to show off cards. I get to say, hey, look at this one and look what I picked up, or I've had this in my collection for so long or whatever. And yeah, so in most of them, you will probably see a smile on my face as I show some stuff off, because this YouTube thing has been just tremendous for my enjoyment of the hobby, and I'm sure you and lots of others feel the same way, especially being able to meet up with fellow YouTubers at shows, the national, whatever the case may be. Lots of friendships have formed through YouTube through this, so it's been great.
Oh yeah. But I mean, after watching you for like the past year, and you come off like you enjoying what you're doing, but you're calm and smooth about it. I didn't expect to see in that early, almost like a pinch of Dylan
Yeah.
to your delivery.
Yep.
So, but I enjoyed it. So
Good.
Saw something different.
Yeah.
But speaking of some of the other projects you're working on, I saw the Vintage Index. So a big project there with Mike, baseball collector. How did that come about?
Well, it was Mike did, I think it was one of his Golden Age of Cardboard podcast slash videos series that he had been doing now for, I think he's up to over 100 episodes. And he did one, something about our vintage cards recession proof or something like that. We were talking about, obviously, with the economy coming out of COVID, just everything going crazy, and how vintage cards, maybe some of the more modern cards started to go down from the COVID peak. How do vintage cards match up over time? How well have they done with other factors? And he made a comment of, boy, it'd be really nice if we could see a trend going back several years for certain cards, and see how they tracked over time, how the pandemic affected those vintage cards and so on. And he said, yeah, if I had the time, I'd like to, do that or whatever. Well, I reached out to him and said, hey, I said, I think that would be cool. I'm a numbers guy, number crunching and just statistics and different things. I'm a nerd that way. I love numbers and charts and things. And so I said, hey, I'd be willing to do that. And he says, hey, I'll help you out. So Mike and I just worked and just picked 100 cards and some of the key rookie cards and things like that. And then we went back to the beginning of 2019 and just entered tons of data on historical price. And then we would just talk about the next month, the newer sales, and tracking that. Now we backed off. We're going to be doing it more on like a quarterly basis, because at least for these 100 vintage cards, there's not a whole lot of change now. It's sort of evened out. It's sort of come back to a new normal.
Yeah, a
And
higher flat again.
Yeah. And so there wasn't a whole lot of breaking news of, hey, this card's doing this or the whole index is doing that. And I'm actually in the process, and I think I mentioned it the last episode that we did. I'm going to be creating a couple more indexes. So we'll have the Vintage 100, which spans the from 1948 to the 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson rookie. We're going to keep that and keep tracking that, but we're doing what's called a large cap, a mid cap, and a small cap index. And the large cap are looking primarily at the 40s to maybe pretty much the 40s, but you're going to get like some 1940 play ball cards in there and some red hearts and things, like some non-Topps cards, some 49 leaf, things like that. And so it would primarily be 40s and 50s as the big cap, so the more expensive cards. Then the
Yeah.
mid cap are going to be cards from the 1960s because they tend to be that next lower price point. And then the small cap index would be cards from the 70s. So it'll be interesting to see how those different decades or time periods, one from a historical basis. So we may spend an episode or two looking at the specific new indexes backwards to get a sense of where they were and then how they go moving forward. So eventually we'll have 4 indexes that we do and talk about each episode on a quarterly basis. So that's fun. I just like that stuff, and I'm glad
Oh, yeah.
that Mike is willing to co-host that with me.
Well, sure. That's great stuff. I did look at some of your most popular videos are the vintage index stuff. So obviously a lot of people have interest in it. One of the other things was one of your older videos actually where you went over organizing your Wade Boggs collection.
Yep, the card catalog back there. That's been a popular video. Everyone is, of course, when they see the thumbnail, they're like, "Oh, wow, that would be cool to store cards." And uh, I always wanted something to store my cards in rather than cardboard boxes. Now you can't quite see behind me and stuff. I do have a ton of standard cardboard boxes. But I wanted something a little bit nicer. And in our local town that I grew up, the library was moving to a new location. So they
Yeah.
had an auction of all this stuff they had in the library. And these card catalogs came up for auction. I won't go into the whole story, but let's just say that there were a lot of antique dealers that were really mad at me for winning and for what I paid for those, because I get those for a great deal. And I think there's a total of 90 drawers, and they are perfect with one exception. They will not hold PSA. They're not quite wide enough, the drawers, to hold PSA
Yeah.
slabs. They'll hold BGS, not SGC, I don't think. But for my PSA collection, it would have been nice to store them in some of those drawers as well. But that's where I keep all my Boggs cards. And I have them in order by year, then by set and card number and so on. So I still have the ones that you see little white labels. Those are the ones that are pretty much full. So I still have a good number there to. That's not bad. I'm just doing the background here. I still have those that I could still fill out. So it'll take a while for me to fill that with Boggs cards. But
That's a much better item to be in there. And I don't feel sad that my kids will never learn what the Dewey Decimal System is. So
interesting story. Very quickly.
Okay.
When I bought this, a lot of about half the drawers still had the index cards, the Dewey Decimal System and brief explanation of the books, right?
Sure.
So what the heck? I mean, I literally had about 45,000 index cards because it just came with the auction. Hey, this is what you get, and it comes with it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was getting ready to throw it away, throw all those index cards away, and I did a search on eBay. People were buying those index cards as a craft and little, I don't know, little projects and stuff. I started selling them in groups of 100, 200, 300. I sold pretty much all of those index cards and made back the money that I spent on that and a couple $100 more by selling the index cards on eBay. They weren't even blank. They were typewritten, and someone said, "Oh yeah, we love to use these as some project." I'm like, "Have at it."
People will buy anything.
People buy anything on eBay. And I can't believe I made my money back and more by selling the index cards that I essentially got for free.
That's crazy. What you thought was the garbage that was in it.
Yep.
Paid for the whole thing.
Yeah.
All right. So that was my standard part of the interview. Before we move on to the 10 random questions about John, anything you want to add or share or anything else?
I don't I don't think so. I guess my next well, one of my goals for this year was to do more videos like this and collaboration. So again, thanks for having me on your show. I started a new show with Dawn, Dawn's Field of Dreams Cards, two guys, one hobby. I said, hey Dawn, you want to just start some show? We'll have some guests on and all this stuff, and it's loosey goosey. We don't necessarily have an episode every week or whatever. That's been fun. So I really enjoy these collaborations, getting on with other collectors and just talking about this hobby that we love. So yeah, if there's uh, any other collaborations and stuff that people are interested in, just let me know.
All right, cool. Well, for my first question, um, what is your earliest memory?
Earliest memory. Wow. Just memory in general.
Well, like my example, the only thing I know for certain is a memory and not something that I just feel like is because I saw the photos, is when I was in preschool. One day I got stuck with the tractor and I really wanted the normal pedal car. The tractor was slower. So
Yeah. My earliest memory is probably, and I'm not sure how old I was. It was maybe 3 or 4. And what I remember was, again, this is going back to when probably before there were, car seats and all this safety stuff of, hey, if you have to be in the back seat and do all this stuff. I was in the front seat of a car, and I remember there was like seeing like almost like police lights and having some candy like a lifesaver or something like that. And then I said to my mom, I'm like, I remember being in a car. I was really young and being offered a lifesaver or something, and there were some cop lights or something. And she's like, how do you remember that? And I'm like, I don't know. Well, it was my godmother um took me up to Massachusetts as a surprise to my grandparents. And on the way up, either she had car problems or something, and there were the police lights. I was sitting in the front, and they either just calm me down or whatever. I don't know what. She gave me a lifesaver, and again, I was 3 or maybe 4, and I sort of remember she took me up to my grandparents' house and just stood me there, knocked on the door, and ran around the corner. And so there I'm standing there at like 3 or 4 years old, and my grandmother opens the door. She's like, John, what the heck are you doing here? And all this stuff. And then she comes around the corner. So again, I was like 3 or 4 years old. So that's probably the oldest memory I have.
Okay. So outside of Wade Boggs, who's the most famous person you've ever had a chance to meet directly in real life?
Meet to say hi. Well, I probably came within 20 feet or so of Donald Trump. This was way before he got into to politics and became president. We were in New York City and we decided, hey, let's go visit the Trump Towers. And as we were walking in the lobby, I think he was walking the other way or whatever. And it was just a quick thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was just Donald Trump. But in terms of speaking to someone, it was 1988. Coming back from vacation with my parents, we were out in California, and it was we were either flying into Baltimore from Detroit or St. Louis, and walking on, they load the first class passengers first and all this stuff, and so I'm walking through first class, and right to my right, I go to my dad, "That's Jim Palmer," and my dad's like, "That's not Jim Palmer." I'm like, "Dad, it was 1980. I was 16." I'm like, "Dad, that's Jim Palmer." And fortunately, our seats were like 2 or 3 rows right behind the curtain between the peons in first class. And I kept insisting to my dad, I know that's Jim Palmer. And he's like, well, yeah, you go up, he sort of dated me, like, you go up to him and like ask for his autograph or something. I'm like, okay. So I said, well, what do you have for me to sign? And we didn't have a ball, or we didn't come prepared. So he has this index card with the lines on one side, and he had some notes for work or whatever. And the other side was blank, though. He says, this is all I have. And he found a pen. So I checked with the stewardess. I said, hey, I think that's Jim Palmer up there. I said, is it okay if I just go up there? And she sort of looks at me like, well, she says, let's just wait till we take off and this undo your seatbelt sign and all that stuff. And then just, you can quickly go up. So I'm like, okay. So we take off, we level off and the seatbelt lights go off. And the stewardess was sort of like, just, sort of gave me a little nod. So I got up and went through, and he was just, resting in his chair. And I said, excuse me. I said, are you Jim Palmer? He goes, yes. I said, oh, it's very nice to meet you. I said, would you mind signing this for me? He's like, sure. He says, what's your name? And so he wrote to John, best wishes, Jim Palmer, 1988. And I came back and I said, thank you. I did a little chit chat about, oh, you flying in to do a Orioles game? Because I think he was a commentator for the Orioles at the time. He said, no, I'm just heading home or something like that. I'm like, well, have a good flight. Thank you very much. And of course, I came back to my seat with a big grin on my face to my dad, like, I told you it was him. So I still have that index card, and I have it framed with just a standard photo, and not set up here because I don't have room. But in the future, I hopefully have room to put that Jim Palmer autograph that I got in person on an airplane.
Awesome. Yeah, there'll be room in the Boggs basement, right?
Yes.
But do you have a favorite song?
Ooh, favorite song. I would, boy, that's a good one. I would probably have to say, only because it annoys my wife so much, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
That's awesome.
Just when she's like, oh my gosh, this song is so long. I'm like, yeah, but it's so good.
Exactly.
But,
I mean, I got exposed to it from Wayne's World.
Yes.
So.
When I always, if I'm not, well, even sometimes when I'm driving, when it gets to that point, you got to do the drum. Yeah. But, yeah. I'm a big fan of Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd is probably my I don't know if that's one of your questions, but that's probably my favorite band of all time, Pink Floyd.
It was not, but thanks for the addition. So I'm up to number 5. So right. What is your favorite animal?
Favorite animal? I would have to say a dog. I had, growing up, I had a little Cairn Terrier, like a Toto in The Wizard of Oz, a black Cairn Terrier, and just loved it. And then as I got older, we had 2 cats and a Cocker Spaniel. The Cocker Spaniel, the ex got that, and I got the 2 cats. And then since I got remarried, the cats have unfortunately gone away, and we have 2 Yorkies, and they are just our world, and they're just so amazing. So dogs, I just, at least our we call them our 2 girls. They're just amazing, and just make our lives so much happier.
Cool. Yeah, my dog's sitting right over there. But number 6, if you could switch lives with anyone for a day, who would it be? And feel free if there's any particular day in particular.
Wow. Switch lives with someone for one day.
Anyone, anytime in history.
Oh, anytime in history, even.
Sure.
Boy. Oh my goodness. This just popped into my head, and probably wouldn't be necessarily what I would go with if I had more time to think about it, but it just popped into my head. Probably, and it maybe no particular name. I'm a sort of like a history buff. I love different things with history, and I just think it would be really interesting to be a survivor passenger of the Titanic. That, I think, would be just to experience that. It just knowing, because I'm sure there's things that went on that aren't told either correctly or had dramatic flair because of the movie and this or that or whatever. But I don't know. That just popped into my head. The sinking of the Titanic was such a historic event in the early 20th century, and to be and I preface it with being a survivor of the Titanic, just to, I don't know, even though it'd been crazy and chaotic and stuff, I don't know,
to at least be a witness to it. So
yeah.
Number 7 is what's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie. I would probably have to say Braveheart.
Same answer as we
Gladiator,
thought.
maybe number 2, and then you start getting into the James Bond movies. I'm a huge Bond fan, but I would probably have to say Braveheart. Yeah, it was just an epic movie.
Oh yeah, I've lost track of how many times I watched it, but
Yeah.
so it's definitely my top 10. So
Again, that historic aspect that I'm interested in, that the history. In fact, my grandfather did a family tree. Now, not necessarily the record name; it stops at one point, but other branches that he's been able to track. I believe there was one family that was on the English side of one of the battles that was portrayed in Braveheart, where I don't know if the Scots won that battle or the English won that, but supposedly he was, I forget which one it was, the name, but supposedly he was in that one battle against William Wallace.
okay,
So,
cool.
yeah.
Clearly he lived. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 8. What was your favorite subject in school?
Probably history. I liked math. Again, I like numbers, but probably history.
It's
Yep.
a good one. Uh, excluding water, since we obviously need it to live, what would be your favorite beverage?
Favorite beverage. I'm not a big beer or wine drinker. I try not to drink a lot of soda, so believe it or not, I'd probably have to say coffee. It's just this right here. This is my wife hates the smell of coffee. Again, just to chide her a little bit. It's like, hey, I made some coffee. Would you like some? And she's like, no. But no, I'd have to say, yeah, after water, which is this is majority water, coffee is my biggest vice.
You can even do it in the evening and still sleep.
Oh yeah, whether it be tea or coffee, I can drink it. I can drink half a cup of coffee and finish up a cup right before I go to bed. And yeah, yet I sort of need it in the morning. It sort of it's weird. My body acts weird to caffeine, I guess. But
Okay, yeah, I've got to cut myself off midday, otherwise
yeah,
I'm having trouble going to sleep. So,
yep, not me.
all right. For my final question, if you had been forced to pick a different player for your super collection, who would you have? Well, who would you choose?
I think I probably would have had a harder choice when I first made my decision. So I'll answer it two different ways. One, once I decided to make Wade Boggs and collect Wade Boggs, I may have gone the route of maybe Tony Gwynn. Again, that same type of player. Uh, Today, if I had to say, okay, I'm going to stop collecting Wade Boggs and focus on another player, it would have to be Corey Stremski. That's sort of an easy. That's sort of an easy
Sure.
one. It's another Red Sox great, and I have his tops run. I sort of like all his other oddball cards, but I don't. I could easily find myself going down the rabbit hole. I
Oh yeah.
picked up an 81 Drake's recently, which was sort of not on my belt. I'm like, oh, that's a cool card. It was cheap. I'll grab that one. I got to be careful, or I'm going to just start going everything Corey Stremski, which wouldn't be bad, but I want to build my other vintage collection. But,
Oh yeah. I mean, basically the immediate prior generation Red Sox hero.
Yep.
So,
Yep. And then after that would be Ted Williams, but that's just you're talking a whole nother level.
oh yeah, that's definitely a different cost bracket there as well.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It was great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
And,
This was fun. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
oh, it's my pleasure. Everybody who made it this far, thanks for watching. And I will see you guys next time. So, thanks.